Hey everybody, welcome to my channel. Today I've got an interesting project to look at. It's a pair of hi-fi speakers from probably around about the early 70s. Now these speakers by today's standards are quite an unusual design because they radiate sound upwards and outwards rather than forwards as in the case of most loudspeakers. I've got the fixing screws removed so I can show you just exactly how that works. Now, this little frame at the top carries the top grille, as you can see, and this is a side grille which has got openings for the sound to come through, and that whole lot would normally be fixed down with screws. I've just removed the screws, and if you look at the drive unit arrangements, they are quite unusual. So first of all, there's the base unit. The base unit is loaded, as we would say, by the cabinet, but it's screwed face down, so obviously it fires straight into the box where the crossover in that is. The tweeter is then glued or stuck by a pad to the back of the base unit and points upwards. So the base unit loading is into the cabinet, but it can also radiate higher frequencies out sideways, and those frequencies will bounce off the walls and surroundings. Much the same with the tweeter fires upwards, but if the speaker is placed near a wall, then it will give this nice reflected sound from the wall. And obviously the drive units are balanced so that they would work effectively in this configuration. You're probably interested in who made these speakers, and on the bottom it actually says Twist Acoustics Limited, Balham SW12 England. And the model seems to be a Puccini B. And it has been made under patents, so interesting to see that. And the rather odd shape is so that the connector can enter from the side, so the odd shape of the base, so the connectings can be put in. And then drive unit wiring is quite simple. The drive unit wiring is just here, and that comes up the outside, direct from the cabinet straight into the drive units. Now the problem with both of these speakers, both speakers in the pair, is that the foam surrounds of the tweeters has perished. I'll just put up a still of that with an arrow to show you where the damage is. Now the tweeters looked okay initially, but when I looked at them a little bit closer I could see that the foam surrounds were broken. So the project for today, and here is the other tweeter faceplate, is to replace the black foam surround which sits around the diaphragm of the tweeter, and you can see that this one has actually started, it's pretty much split away. So it's quite delicate work. It involves disconnecting the wires that lead into the voice coil. Then the easy part really is just to break, once that's done, is to break the diaphragm out of there, then to remove any trace of the existing foam and replace it with a new piece of foam. The foams are available, and I've also got some special glue from the supplier, so the foams are available for these and for other tweeters or base units in fact. But it's a fun little project. I hope it all works out. It would be great to restore these speakers to working order again for the person who owns them. He's inherited them from a family member, really keen to get them going with their original system of a quad preamp and a quad power amp. So I'm hoping you got a pretty good view of the back of this tweeter plate now. The first job, which isn't immediately obvious, is that because there's no polarity markings on this, I've just put some red paint on this end to indicate which was the positive when it was assembled. And what I'm going to do next is to use a soldering iron to just warm this up, try and remove the solder around here very gently because this wire is so fine, and then possibly, just with a bit of heat on the wire, pull the wire out of that channel. So let's see what we can do with this. Okay, so that's one wire removed. I don't know if you can see that, but one of the wires has come off. I just gently heated it and teased it out of the glue. And now what I need to do is to mark this wire as being the positive, because right now there's no marking on it at all. So let's just go and do that. So now it's time to do the other wire. That's both wires removed. Now I don't know how much of that you could see, but I was just applying gentle heat to these tiny wires that exit from the voice coil. Now both of them are loose, so in theory I should just be able to remove the central part of this. I'm not sure about that technique of just slightly warming the wire with the soldering iron and teasing it out of the channel. It worked, but there may have been other better methods like trying to dissolve the glue. I'm not so sure, to be honest with you. So as long as we've got a working method, that's good. And now what I'll do is a close-up of that area so you can hopefully see a little bit more detail of how the wires have become disconnected. And then the next stage will be to remove the foam from around the edge of the diaphragm in preparation for the new foam to be stuck down. So if I can detach the diaphragm first, separate this from the faceplate, that's going to be the best way. Now I can continue to clean up both parts separately, and then this one should be ready for new foam. So after a bit of scraping and scratching, I'm pretty happy that I've got all the glue off this now. So this fixing surface is nice and smooth. The glue's off the inner edge, and I've also, on this side, I haven't removed this glue from the bond face because that will go back in the same place anyway. But I have removed the glue from these channels just to make it a little bit safer for that wire to go back through, and then I will just fix the wire back into the channels afterwards. The next job for me now will be this, and then I think once this is done, it should really be downhill with just reassembly. Yeah, I think I might give that a soak in some spirit and see if that will help it along. Okay, so I think I'm good with that now. I've checked the fit of the sponge in the faceplate, that looks good. And it's looking pretty good to me, so rather than going over the top, I think I'm going to stop there. And now we'll get straight on and start looking at the reassembly of the tweeter. I've put a cutting board down here because I don't want to get glue everywhere. I've got to prepare a little brush in a special way. Just about to do that, and then we'll get started. So these are all parts I need to reassemble the tweeter plate, and the recommendation is to prepare a brush a little bit like this, which is a flat brush with a flat tip, so the brush is flat in both directions but with a good proportion of the bristles cut off, so that when painting areas like this, it just makes it a little bit easier. And they also recommend fitting the sponge into the faceplate first, so we're going to go with that recommendation. And not really knowing too much about this, I'm going to be a little bit cautious about the amount of glue on the brush, just to be on the safe side. Try and get an even thin film, I think is best. So that's the faceplate glued. Time now to do the same on on the foam. So that looks pretty good to me for glue. Let's bring the faceplate back into play and just drop this in place. And probably a bit of pressure, I think. That's worked very well. The sponge is now fixed to the faceplate. There's not a great deal of glue beyond the perimeter of the faceplate, so I'm pretty happy with that result. So getting towards the end of the job now, I just need to get some glue on this surround on the inner edge and then glue the diaphragm and then assemble those two together. So I just move this out of the way, move everything out of the way in fact, quickly clean up this board, get the glue off it. Then we should be good to assemble this now. Just remember which way around this goes. This side is the plus. And the plus is there. So I think that's quite nicely centered. The wires are correctly oriented. So now it's just a question putting a little bit of pressure on this surround to glue it. That's the surround replaced now, and it looks pretty good. I think I'm liable to leave this to dry for a little bit, just to make sure that it's thoroughly glued. And then the last stage will be reassembly. Soldering the wires on, so those wires will need to be soldered on, and then reassembly. Now let's just put this to one side for the glue to dry. And then we'll pick up the story on this one when it goes back together. So the final stage of assembly is to wire up the voice coil to the terminals. I think perhaps just tuck that wire down inside the terminal. Now I'll pop a still photo into that later. So then some solder to hold it in place. That's that side done, and then this one. And then solder it in place. Like that. And then just press the wire into the little channel here. And then that can be fixed in place with some glue. It's both the wires in their channels. That will just be enough. The glue is just to hold the wire down at the bottom of this groove as it passes under the magnet. So now to leave that to dry for a bit, and then just dress these wires either side of the voice coil very slightly so that they've got some good flexibility in them for when the tweeter operates. When the glue has dried and I've just set those wires up as they should be, I'll add a still of how that looks. Now we return to the speaker because the faceplate is all ready to go. The faceplate can be fitted onto the tweeter magnet, just aligning the correct side so that the positive is next to the positive wire. Now the plate is fixed to the magnet but will float slightly. Just back these off a little bit. So it is very slightly adjustable, and I'll need to center that plate on the magnet to get it working properly. Just to solder these wires on. Then I can turn the power amp on, and out comes the test time. I reckon that's pretty well aligned. I've aligned it so that the sound is as pure as possible, so that the tone is as pure as possible, and just lock down these two screws. I think I'll stop the sound now. And just tighten down the other screws. And then just check that the diaphragm moves without any scratching sounds. If it makes any scratching noises at all, it would mean that the voice coil isn't centered in the tweeter, but that sounds good to me. No sound at all. And there we are, the job's done. Just got one more speaker to do now, so I'll have to reassemble the tweeter on the other one, and then it'll be all good for a sound check. So all fixed, the tweeter's now completely rebuilt, as I was showing in the video of putting new surrounds in. They're reassembled, the grills are back on. The only thing that's left to be done is just to pop these on, which is the top grills. I'll leave these off for a second so I can give you a bit of a close-up. So this is the quad amplifier system. It's a 44 preamp and a 306 power amplifier, which is 50 watts per channel, probably about right for these speakers. And pretty typical of the kind of amplifier that would have powered these speakers in the day. The only thing left for the speakers is just to put the grills on, which is really just a cosmetic trim, so the grills would go in the top here. And that just finishes the speaker off, so everything's hidden. So the system restoration completed, speakers are now looking good again and sounding good. They both sound extremely good and also very similar, which is really important. And it will be great to return the system to its owner, who can experience the sound as they would have done in the 70s. And don't forget, if you like this kind of restoration work, like and subscribe my channel, and I'll upload some more as soon as I've done some. Thanks for watching.